Hello everybody and welcome to The Unshackled. Here today we have another episode of Debt Nation. We have a guest on, Stephen Wells. He's a climate change guy. I met him at Liberty Fest. It was a fantastic festival. We talked a lot about Austrian economics, we talked a lot about Friedman, and we talked a lot about liberty and, free markets and all that sort of good stuff. So he's going to be co-hosting me and helping me out, dragging me through what's known as the Iran crisis. We're going to do a little bit of analysis on that. Is Iran going to war? Are we going to have a war? Is it all happening? Is it World War III? I don't know. We'll have to live and see. So thank you very much, Stephen, for coming on, and we're going to hear from you in a second. I'm going to read out a little bit of a monologue now, and then we'll go on. So gold prices rallied to a 6-year highs last week and continued posting gains on Monday at 1,403 per ounce. China, boosting its gold stockpile to shift away from the US dollar, has added to the precious metals resurgence. The People's Bank of China has purchased more than 70 tons of gold since December. According to the World Gold Council, the WGC, before that, the Chinese Central Bank had not reported an increase in gold reserves for more than 2 years, and the official figures remained unchanged from October 2016 to November 2018. The increased gold purchasing by Asia's top economy comes at a time when global central banks are accumulating the precious metal in record numbers. Russia has been the top buyer of gold, adding about 274 tons of its reserves last year. In the first 5 months of 2019, Russia added 78 tons of gold to its coffers, increasing the metal's share in its international reserves by 3.7%. Gold reserves of the central banks around the world surged by 651.5 tons, or 74% year on year in 2018, data from the World Gold Council showed. Analysts say Beijing was doubling down on gold to diversify its reserves away from the greenback, or the US dollar standard. The country has been selling off US treasuries lately, with its holdings having plunged from the peak of 1.3 trillion in late 2013 to about 1.1 trillion in April. Beijing is worried US-China ties could get worse, so the PBOC has jumped to stockpile its gold reserves, said Tom McGregor, Beijing-based journalist and political analyst. Gold is a safe haven investment, added McGregor, who is a senior editor for China's national broadcaster CCTV. Gold has been quietly underperforming most G10 currencies since the US-China trade war began. Scotiabank commodity strategist Nicky Shields told the Kiko News he described it as the latest rally as a Stangle-bold breakout that excludes metal's usual direct correlation with the US dollar. The world's two largest economies and US-China have been involved in the trade conflict since March 2005. The escalation of US tariffs has increased 25% on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods in China in response to introduce duties on 25% of 5,000 of US products in America. So, sorry, I just got to get rid of the teleprompter speed on that one. I've got to get used to that. So basically, China is buying gold, Russia is buying gold, Iran is buying gold. These countries, this is a story that we've seen before, because when I met you at Liberty Fest, I like gold. I've been talking about gold, silver, Bitcoin. It's the three big. It's if you want to diversify outside of these. The US dollar, the Australian dollar, the renminbi, if you want to diversify outside of these fiat currencies, we're all running to these safe haven commodities. What do you say, Stephen Wells, on gold, on silver, on Bitcoin? You're a freedom man. You're a liberty man. You were there at Liberty Fest. You're big on all the alternative currencies, and you're big on gold and silver. So what do you say about these moves from central banks in China and Russia and Iran and in the ECB, where they're buying up global reserves, buying up gold in order to hedge against an ever-inflating US dollar?
Yeah, it's... on one side of things, I've been waiting for 3 or 4, 5 years now. People keep talking about gold and have been for a long time, and we keep sort of waiting for gold to finally show its worth again, and for the debt Ponzi scheme to finally sort of collapse in on itself, and for real money to come back again. So it's on one side of things, I'm always thinking that it's going to go sooner or later. And on the other side of things, each time there's a news report about gold coming out and central banks buying it and stuff, I wonder whether it's going to be a false signal again or not, because there's been so many of them in the past.
Yeah, you're right. So what's been happening is every time gold has started to go up, and we all started to say, oh, it's going on this time. It's the time that it's all happening, and then the central banks buy and they suppress the price, and they've kept it under those magic prices, which allow gold to go up. If you look at Mike Maloney, he's got those famous books about gold and precious metals, and he says that societies are based on cyclical notions. They start off with 1-to-1 ratios of gold, so everyone walks around with a piece of gold and silver in their pocket, and then as time goes on, they become fiat backed, and so then you have a bit of paper and a bit of gold, and then eventually the state grows. And this is what the freedom people like yourself and the freedom people at Liberty Fest, this is the message that they're trying to push. They're trying to say, don't let your state get too out of control. Don't let it too large, because it just eats into your prosperity, because it gets too many, it gets too complicated to control too many assets across too vast a geopolitical region. And if you want a strong currency, and if you want a currency that's backed on gold, then you need to keep your state small. You can't have too many federal employees. I mean, you're on board with the whole... You're not an anarchist or something, are you? I don't remember you ever saying you're an anarchist, right? You're not politically an anarchist, are you?
No. At the end of the day, if you get rid of one government, it's going to be a vacuum and somebody else is going to move in. So it's a question of who's going to be in there, and what can we do to have a check on their power. So yeah, I mean, we're heading more and more in the West to a bigger government, more intrusive government, a bigger bureaucracy. It's growing every year. I don't think we're at the end of it yet. I think it's going to get a lot worse in the West before it's going to get better. And how on finance markets, I've got a feeling that they're going to run. They're going to keep it ticking along for a fair bit longer. I think this, we've seen, when Europe had the crisis, that crisis with Greece and Spain and Italy and Ireland, they'll do whatever it takes to pop it up for as long as they can. So, my thoughts are that it's still got some time to run. And the gold side of things with the central banks, it's very, very hard to see into what they're actually planning. But I can't personally see it breaking out for the average Joe who's gone out and bought a few coins down at down at the gold bank. I've still got sort of a personal feeling that the central banks are still going to keep the system chugging along for a fair bit longer yet. And obviously, the longer they do it, the worse it's going to be when it finally goes, which is why they're trying so hard to prop it up as they are.
And do you think one of the reasons, because we're looking at all this news out of Iran, they just shot down one of these drones that was flying. They're not really sure whether it was in Iranian space or out. Both sides are saying different things. do you think things like Iran, geopolitical events like Iran, these are the reasons that they're kicking the can down the road because they have other imperial ambitions that they're trying to yet fulfill, and they're not worried about scooping what wealth they can off the population that's been decimated over and over and over again? Do you think the reason they're deferring it is because they have other things to deal with?
End game is, for all the players involved, is the throne. If you're into Game of Thrones, it's happening. There are people playing for the world at the moment, and they want the world, and they've been looking at the world for decades now. So the Middle Eastern conflict is, there's a lot of it pushed by Israel wanting a greater Israel. There is America wanting resources. There's a whole range of things. There's a whole range of players who have got different goals and different aspirations of why they want it. But at the end of the day, everyone's playing for the same thing, which is, everyone wants to rule the world. So the hardest thing at the moment with this sort of thing is how to read Trump, because Trump has flashed his muscles a few times since he started presidency. And think back to North Korea and everyone thinking that there was going to be World War III over there, and then the next thing you know, he does a deal with with Pyongyang, and all of a sudden he's the big deal maker again. So you never really know where you stand with Trump. Why he's doing it? Is he just flashing his muscles again so he can get some better deal with the US? Or are the neocons in his government pushing for the same old thing that they were pushing in Bush's day? It's very, very hard to get a read on geopolitics at the moment.
Well, yeah, Trump argued when he was a candidate. This is a very interesting point that's coming out of Perth here. This is a very interesting point because Trump argued as a candidate, we don't want this total stability because the departments of the governments were getting very cozy with sort of projecting what they were trying to do. And he said, all right, we've got to throw in some confusion into the system. And I think he's done that on multiple levels. Whether he knows what he's doing or not is kind of irrelevant, but he's definitely thrown the seeds of confusion in, and people, you're right, one day it seems like the neocons are on top and John Bolton's on top and Jared Kushner's running around, and then suddenly it all switched back and then Trump's on top and Trump's running around. One thing I can be pretty certain on is there was no Russia collusion, there was no Russia connection, and it was a big waste of time. And, it kept the Democrats busy for 3 years, so that's good. At least they were busy doing something. But yeah, you're right. This is you're completely right. So he's done this before on with North Korea, and he came out on top. I mean, Kim Jong-un sort of backed down after a while, and that was it. But Iran is a different player. Iran is a big player. I mean, we're talking about a former world power, the Persian Empire. We're talking about a country that has been around for a long time. It's very strong. It's been through all the problems in the Middle East. It's had wars on its borders for a long time, both in Iraq and both in Afghanistan on the other side. And it can put up with a lot of pain. Its country can absorb a lot of pressure. So do you think that America, do you think that there's any strategic reason for America to go in there that's on the American side, or do you think it's just the allies in that area, in that region, that are pushing for this or something? What's your take on America's reason, if there was a war potentially? Why would America? What's in its interest in order to take on this big ancient sort of country?
The same reason that America takes on anything. He just wishes to expand its power, and as I said, there are people who want total control, and there are people in the way of that. There are countries in the way of that. But it's a dangerous game because Iran doesn't stand alone. It's not like North Korea. There are China and Russia don't particularly want the US to expand any further, and so it's a very dangerous game we're playing. There is a lot of speculation about what actually has gone down with that ship. The mentions of false flags are popping up around the internet again. and it wouldn't be the first time. So yeah, it's very, very hard to know whether you've got people with their heads put on their shoulders who are trying to get some strategic advantage and are going to back down sooner or later, or whether you've got lunatics running the asylum.
This is why
it's a difficult.
Yeah, this is why we've been talking about gold and silver for a long time, because you have to hedge not only against financial risks, but also against geopolitical risks. Another geopolitical phenomenon, and something you're more of an expert in, which is fascinating, is climate change. Climate change. You're one of the skeptics floating around. Is that a fair term? Am I misrepresenting you on that point?
Not at all. I proudly embrace the term denier. It's what people who wish to, what the detractors wish to label us with, so they can associate us with denying the Nazi Holocaust and make us look bad. But I figure if someone's going to call you a name, you may as well just embrace it and have fun with it. So yeah, I'm as skeptical as they get.
Okay,
there's probably nobody on the planet.
In that context, give us the Perth Stephen Wells summary of what it is to be a skeptic or a denier. What is that? What does it entail? How far does that go? I mean, how do you have a dartboard with what's his name's face on it? I mean,
with Al Gore.
Yeah, oh good. Have you got a dartboard in your room? If you swing your camera around, can I see the dartboard?
No, there's no malice in me. It wouldn't surprise me if there's not enough money in denying. No, it's all in the believers camp, and if there's going to be any dartboards, it'll be of my face. And they'll be throwing darts at me, I reckon, not the other way around. There is a guy, an Australian guy. I've been in my book. I can't remember his name, but there's a guy. He's an Australian guy, and he's at the University of Austria, and he's called for people like myself to be executed. That just for having the opinions that we've got, we should be put up. We should be publicly executed because. Worse than murderers and worse than pedophiles.
So he's a climate change jihadi. He's as bad as the people in Saudi Arabia. On one hand, I bet you anything he condemns human rights in Saudi Arabia. I'll give you that much. But then he turns around and he says, "But those denying people over there, they need to get the same punishment." So he's a hypocrite. That's what he is.
Absolutely, but I mean, those crimes. So there's people who murder a few individuals. There are even people like Hitler who genocide lots of people. But me, I'm worse than the lot because I'm endangering everybody. The whole world's going to die if I get my way. That's what they believe. So I'm up for the chopping block. So I don't know how much longer you'll see me alive. I expect within a few years I'll be off to the gulags, and that will be the last that you see of me because there are people who think that I'm a very.
I can think of a punishment. So this is just a random punishment, I thought. But what they could do is they could tie your feet to next to the ocean, and they could just slowly drown you over time.
Oh well, only yesterday I was looking at the projections for Perth. Of the sea level rise, and the local council, having listened to the United Nations, has got a red line shown along the coast where in 100 years' time the ocean's going to be 6 feet higher than they are now. So yeah, that'll be a very good punishment. Just tie me to a pole on the ocean, and I'm sure within minutes, literally minutes, the seas will have risen so much that I will be gurgling my words to my watery death.
There you go. So the man in Austria will be very happy with that. So tell us.
Absolutely. So.
I love it. So tell us briefly what you guys believe, what you think's going to happen, what your give us about a 5-minute synopsis on what what it is as you sum it up, you know, the elevator pitch of denial.
Well, my elevator pitch of denial is that the greenhouse effect itself is actually pseudoscience, that we took a wrong turning in science about 100 years ago. And so they tell you that because of carbon dioxide and water vapor, that this makes the surface of the planet 33 degrees warmer than it would be if all the water vapor and carbon dioxide disappeared. And it is my assertion that that is demonstrably false. You only have to look at other planets in the solar system and look at what the temperatures are at the same atmospheric pressures as we have here on Earth, and it's a very, very quick and simple calculation to show that there is no difference in temperature other than what distance from the sun creates. So everything about this subject is fraudulent, from the greenhouse effect to the claims of global warming to the renewable energy target and money that's being thrown at that, to money that's been thrown at local councils, to money that's coming from the UN. It's just one great big cesspool of corruption and dishonesty. And you know, in terms of the geopolitical side of things and the financial side of things, which you're looking at, a lot of the growth in big government comes from this scam. So if you want to know why it's going to get bigger and why it's going to continue to get bigger for longer and why the Ponzi scheme is going to be kept alive, it's because the basis of it is the Agenda 21 summit, which was held in 1990 at the Rio Earth Summit, and all of the programs that have come on from there, which basically call for dissolving of property rights and dissolving of national borders, and basically running everything through a top-down central planning global governance system. So there are a lot of unpleasant people trying to do some unpleasant things, and we're all paying for it in ways that you can't even begin to imagine.
Have they evolved from the Agenda 21 to the Agenda 30 now? Because I've been reading about Agenda 2030. Is that still a thing?
Yeah, well, so it's basically, Agenda 2030 is basically just updated Agenda 21, so they've moved on. It's now the implementation stage, so when you hear Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or whatever her name is, talking about we've got 11 years to save the planet, that's why that date is chosen, 2030, because they're trying to implement all of these things where, you know, they get rid of cars and roads and buses and trains and planes for everybody apart from the select few who run the politburos.
Yeah, because essentially it is
20.
communism, right? It's trying to get a communism sort of adopted, and this is what I'm not sure if you follow, but I mean, real hardcore patriots like the James Birch Society and others, you know, who watch global governments and who are afraid of global governments, they were always saying this because they were trying to stop communist infiltration of West, and they were saying they're going to do it through subversive means, through Islam, through climate, through big government, through welfarism, through eternal war, perpetual war, and by ceding their authority to larger international institutions, including, but not only, the United Nations. So you're saying that the United Nations is implementing a global fear campaign in order to implement communism. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much. You know, they may call it by another name, but sustainable development is the doublespeak Orwellian term that they've used. So, you know, you can't turn on the television these days without hearing the word sustainable. It all stems back from a book written by Maurice Strong, who was a protege of the Rockefeller family, and a former Norwegian prime minister, I think. Can't remember what her position was in Norway, but she was also the leader of the Global Socialism Society. And they wrote a book which eventually turned into the Agenda 21 document and treaty, which has then since been basically it's been implemented. It's being implemented now. There are various governments around the world who have signed on covertly without their populations knowing about it, and there are various governmental agencies now implementing various programs right down to the local government level, where a local bureaucrat just basically gets a directive saying you need to cover this in your report, and it gets done. So much of it's happening without even people even knowing it. Even the people who are doing it don't actually realize that they're doing it.
Yeah, well, because they've clouded it and coded it in sort of bureaucratic terms. I mean, you said yourself, it's called what's sustainable development nowadays. Sustainability doesn't imply exponential population growth or exponential technology curves. It implies a plateauing of everything. And I guess that's what they see, because they might see that. So my question, I guess, as someone in your position, what about genuine concerns of rainforest deforestation, of acidity of the oceans, of plastic in the oceans? Are there genuine concerns that we can be worried about as a community? What's the deny? Do they worry about these things? Do they care about these things, or do they simply say all of it is propaganda? Are there environmental concerns we should be worried about? What's the stance over there at the denying arena?
Pretty much if there's an issue in your local area that you can see and touch with your eyes and with your hands yourself, then there is a problem for you to go out and solve. So, like, for example, in Perth, there is a bit of an issue with litter on the streets. That's a genuine problem. But it doesn't take a global government system to solve it. It just takes, a local community getting together and solving its local issues. Just about everything that you can think of that we've been pushed down our throats for the past 40 years that has to do with the environment is either outright false or grossly exaggerated, or it's being caused by somebody else, and you are being made to pay for a virtue signaling solution which won't actually change anything. You can take, for example, like plastic in the ocean you mentioned. So what's the virtue signaling solution that we've been told that we have to do? Well, we're no longer allowed to go and have a free plastic bag at the shops. And what's it going to do? It's going to do absolutely nothing. Why? Well, first of all, because 99% of the plastic that's going into the ocean isn't going into the ocean from any Western countries. We solved plastic in the ocean and litter in the ocean and general messiness and trash. We solved that 50, 60 years ago. We have wonderful rubbish collections. We have great waste management systems. We don't put very much trash in the ocean. So banning plastic bags here in Australia is going to do absolutely bugger all to stop plastic going into the ocean down the Yangtze River in China.
Yeah, what about yeah, that is one example. Fila, remember Fila? I think it's a Fila bins or something. China, there was a recent report. Did you see it? China has stopped buying global rubbish because they don't want it. What do you say about that?
They should never have. We should never have sent it there in the first place. I mean, why would you send your rubbish to the country that's most responsible for getting it into the oceans?
Well, they're picking through it. They're getting out the components. They're getting out the chips. They're getting the gold and all the stuff. We've got about 2 minutes left. I just wanted to say, so you're saying that local levels of authority need to take more responsibility. So countries have to take more responsibility for their local area. Local communities and local towns and individuals have to take more responsibility, and we have to push less responsibility, or let these international institutions and governance structures suck up that responsibility because they're misusing it. Is that the idea?
Well, the main reason they're doing it is to abolish property rights. See, sustainable development basically means that somebody has to decide what is sustainable and what isn't. Whereas normally you would decide for yourself what is sustainable and good or bad on your property. If it's a global problem, then somebody else has to solve it and dictate to you what you can and can't do on your own property. And so this is the whole structure behind it. If you do it locally, and if you do it based on property rights, and you do it based on, this is my house and I wish to take care of it, and this is my neighbor and he is impacting on my property because he's a messy bugger, that is a solution via property rights. That's how we've had it, and that's what we want. That's what makes the West successful. But if you go the other way in sustainable development, and you've got somebody in in an office in the United Nations saying, oh, well, I don't think plastic should be allowed anymore, or I don't think fossil fuels should be allowed anymore, then to implement that, you have to abolish property rights. You have to subvert them and make them subordinate to these organizations. So it's very, very, for anybody who cares about finance and about their own financial well-being, it's more than just a thing about the environment. It's the core of our society, and the core of our wealth is our property rights, and we must defend them to the death.
As a capitalist, I 100% agree with you, because I believe personally that the solutions will come from the free market, and that all of these sort of guys are getting in the road of making those solutions possible. We're gonna have to cut it off here, but we're gonna go with a part 2, because this is so interesting, and you're touching on absolutely core factors. I mean, property rights are at the center of what is the Western civilization and what makes us great. So we're touching on very key and core, and we'll have to leave it for another episode. And I want to have you over. Will you do this again with me sometime?
Absolutely. I'll just quickly plug my book while I'm at it.
Oh, absolutely. Go for it.
Confessions of a Climate Change Denier by Stephen Wells. If you don't know anything about science and you've never really liked science, then this is the book for you. It's written for people, ordinary people, in layman's language, so you can understand the issues without having to go out and get a calculator and get a degree in mathematics. I'm
gonna get out there. I'm gonna get out there and buy myself a copy of that and give it to my friends and stuff, because I wanna understand that side of the argument, because I invested in renewables because I knew that the government was forcing everyone to do it, so to make money, right? But it's not because I believed it. It was just a market distortion. So that's kind of what happened. I'm not gonna lie about that. If you're an investor, you have to follow the money, right? You have to follow it. So anyway, thank you very much, Stephen Wells. Thank you we'll do this again sometime, and I think the audience will love that. We'll try and get some better internet too. That'd be really good. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you.